This is the Crowdcrux Crowdfunding Podcast with Sal Briggman, where we cover everything you need to know to launch a successful crowdfunding campaign. We speak with proven entrepreneurs who've raised money from the crowd and want to teach you how to do the same. Stay tuned because we're about to reveal how to launch your dream project with your host, Sal Briggman.
Before we get started with this podcast episode, I want to take a second to introduce you to my friends at Fulfillrite. If you need help shipping out your Kickstarter or Indiegogo perks or rewards, Fulfillrite is the absolute best company for you. I've been working with them for a while and I can vouch for their services. They make it dead simple and take all of the headache out of shipping out all of those boxes, all of those orders to your backers and your customers. If you want to check them out, go to fulfillrite.com at fulfillrite.com. What up, crowdfunders? Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. Hope you're having a great week thus far. This past weekend, I went to the beach. I also came down with a little bit of a cold, so if my voice sounds kind of strange, that's why. But man, beach days, I love beach. Going to Rockaway. Rockaway is like an hour from where I am in New York City. Really beautiful. Just can lay out, can go into the water, which was a little bit cold, but I hope that you had a good weekend and also a good week this week. So today I have a great interview for you, but the other thing I want to mention before we get into today's podcast episode is that if you are interested in getting a little bit more personal attention, you're interested in picking my brain when it comes to crowdfunding, and geez, I've been in this industry since 2012. I've done over 200 podcast episodes. I've helped many students launch their projects. Kickstarterforum.org, more than 8,000 members. I've written 6 books on this topic, YouTube channel, blog. Like, I have a lot of information and knowledge when it comes to crowdfunding, and I've seen a lot of different types of projects. So if you want to take advantage of that knowledge, you really want to use all of these information that I've stored up, these tactics, the things that I know that work, and I've also seen many different types of projects, so the ones that know that work for you. If you want to gain access to me directly, you want to do a one-on-one personal coaching call with me, you can go to the link that I'm about to mention. And I think that my goal with these coaching sessions is not only to be educational and to share with you what you need to do going forward, the best ways to spend your money and your time, what you're doing right, what you're doing wrong, all of this kind of stuff drawing on my experience. But I also really want my students to feel good. Like, I want you to feel amped up and excited the same way that I am. I want you to feel certain and confident going into your campaign. So a lot of the other stuff that I'll do on the calls not only is just sharing education, but also nailing down those parts of the process which you do feel a little bit uncertain about and trying to make you a little bit more confident going forward, and some practical ways to attack that. And sort of the mindset going into a campaign, because it can be really nerve-wracking. There can be a lot of, oh man, I don't know if this is going to work or not. I'm going to have to work long hours. You might be sleep deprived. So I think that's a really necessary component also of the call. But anyway, if you want to check out that link, it's crowdcrux.com/coaching. So that is crowdcrux.com/coaching. You just go there, you answer some of the questions that I have for you, which give me more information about you, about your campaign, about where you are, about your funding goals, so I can sort of tailor my advice to you specifically. And literally, every single person that I've ever done a coaching call with has been like, wow, that is amazing. Thank you so much. Tons of great info. Awesome, Sal. Like, I can't wait to let you know when I launch. And I also have many of my students who then transition into my longer term program. So it's definitely a great way to not only get to know me, also to get some great information. And also, I think setting yourself up for success, there's a lot to be said for that. So hope that you enjoy that. In addition, today's interview is great. It's coming up right after this. Richard and Pieter, welcome to the podcast. You guys have raised more than $290,000 on Kickstarter. Congratulations for that. Your project is a smash success. You also, I know, have learned a lot from doing this project, so welcome to the show. Pieter, I want to address my first question to you. Would love it if you could just tell the listeners a little bit about this campaign, why it is that you made it. Just give them an idea of what this project is that you've raised so much money with.
Okay, so I've been a freelance community manager since 2001. I've been building communities for a while. One of them happens to be a Twin Peaks fan community, which I launched in 2011. And that's right when Twin Peaks fandom had sort of faded. It wasn't part of the discussion anymore online, so I wanted to rekindle that fire by demonstrating that Twin Peaks is still very much alive in contemporary art, music, films, television, etc. So, yeah, I've been engaging the Twin Peaks fan community for well over 7 years now, and back in December, I learned that Richard was working on a project that was one of the characters from the show, and a very beloved character, but also a very beloved actress who always was there for the fans at the conventions, and you know, she was just a very charming and wonderful person. And when I learned that Richard was hoping to make a film about her, like a documentary, I reached out and said, hey, I want to be part of this project because I strongly believe that the fan community will love this film.
Yeah, totally.
And
actually, let me interrupt. Actually, what he said in his email was, I will not sleep until this project is fully funded. And he did not sleep.
Well, Pieter, I mean, it seems like you have more of a background in marketing. Is that right? I mean, you talk about building up fan bases or building up communities. Is your background more in marketing, I guess?
Right. Yeah, I do digital marketing consultancy. I've always been in online marketing and social media. But I started as a community builder, actually, focused on usually tech, software, but that evolved into other things, and especially things that I'm passionate about. So Twin Peaks is definitely one of them.
Okay, so in terms of the breakdown for the project, I guess, Richard, did you sort of bring the vision when it comes to this campaign, what it is you really wanted to raise money for, what you wanted to accomplish, and then Pieter was more of, I guess, implementing the marketing side of it. Is that kind of how the breakdown worked?
I would say to some extent, but I would say that early on it became clear to me that Pieter had more to contribute than just the technical side or the social media marketing side. That this is a very, very creative person in terms of his visual abilities and in terms of his understanding of the themes and the relevance of this character and this project to Twin Peaks fans in general. So I found a really interesting creative collaborative partner. One of the strong things about our piece is the video that tells the story that we're trying to tell and talks about Kickstarter and talks about raising money. And Pieter was very instrumental in shaping and crafting and honing that.
Yeah,
heavy marketing, but also very much involved with the creative, which makes a big difference, I think.
That's awesome. But I still think that crowdfunding is something that's completely new when it comes to documentaries, when it comes to filmmaking. A lot of people are now just sort of dipping their toes in the water when it comes to using Kickstarter as a way to make an indie film or a way to make a documentary. Richard, why is that came to mind? Why did you decide to use crowdfunding than going some other financing route?
It's a little bit complicated, actually. I felt when I first heard about Catherine Coulson, who plays the log lady, who passed 4 days after shooting her final scenes with David for Twin Peaks, I thought this was a shoo-in that some of the big companies were going to hear about it and give me money to make this film, which is what I wanted to do. And I was surprised that they weren't ready to take that giant leap. There's a lot of documentaries out there right now, a lot of people trying to get them funded. So it occurred to me that crowdfunding would be a way to do that. This is the first feature project from History of Cool, which is a production company, but also a much larger entity that's all about sort of documenting and preserving the coolest stuff we've ever created and making sure that people can find it in the midst of all the time, all media, all platforms marketing. And I thought we could cut through that with crowdfunding, and if we were successful, could build a community to help us build History of Cool as well. People who are like-minded, who believe in high-quality things that are specific, want to support it. So I jumped into crowdfunding with the hope of building a larger, building a base that would help us fund not just this project, but future ones.
Totally.
And that was okay.
So Pieter, you meet Richard. He has this great idea, great campaign, something that you also believe in. And then it sort of comes the hard part that you're going to actually launch one of these Kickstarter campaigns. I think there's sort of like this misnomer that like campaigns are just magically funded. You throw them on Kickstarter and just like fund it instantly. But I know there's a lot of work behind it. So what was going through your head, Pieter, when it comes to preparing for the launch of this campaign?
Well, I think, and this ties in with your previous question, I think the biggest challenge in crowdfunding film is that you're pitching an idea for a story, not a product, and you're warming people up in advance for a story you will tell in about a year from now. So that's tough. And if you don't back a product, you don't get to use it, or it may sell out. If you don't back a film, chances are you'll be able to stream it for a couple of bucks when it's out, or in some cases, it will be added to Netflix or Prime at some point. So your audience is really aware of that. And with a film, you're pitching a story, and as powerful as it may be, what becomes really important is the team presenting it. And if you have a certain authority, like previous documentaries you worked on, or if you have an existing long-time engagement with your audience, that definitely helps to gain trust. We got a lot of feedback from David Lynch fans saying that they backed this project because they believe it's in good hands. Not just because it's a powerful story, it's the team that is vital here. And then there's the way the team manages the campaign, like how they talk to and respond to the backers, how they engage on social media, and how they show you care for the subject of your film and for your backers. And we did that in various ways with Kickstarter Live, Facebook Live, Reddit AMAs, that sort of stuff.
So it's a really high touch, almost like you're trying to not only bring backers to the project, but also be super transparent. You're really giving them a look behind the scenes and making them know that it's in good hands so they're okay with actually supporting your project. Tell me, Richard, what was it like when you first launched this project, like the first few days? It goes live, you get a little bit of funding there, but then I know that the real work begins. The real work besides just the people, your friends and your family and people that know you. What was it like that first week with the Kickstarter campaign?
Well, one of the things that to also cycle back a little bit to your the last question, one of the things that's really, really important is getting the word out so that people know about it. We had three really powerful elements there. One is Pieter Dam runs Welcome to Twin Peaks and has the ear of almost all of the Twin Peaks fan base to begin with. Two, we were working really, really closely with Kickstarter, Liz Cook Mo, who runs the documentary section there. And we were also really lucky that a man named David Nin, who had been at Kickstarter for doing PR, left the day that they announced our project within Kickstarter and wanted to do it. And David loved the project so much, he wanted to stay on despite moving on to a new job. He wanted to help us and consult with us. That publicity, we generated an enormous amount of press. And that really, really helped do the beginning. And once you get past that big surge of press and everybody loves us and we're making money and it's looking really good, and you get into that second week and it's slowing down, and all of a sudden you realize how far that goal is. Yeah. Incredibly nerve-wracking. And it forces you to continue to think of new things that you can do to engage your audience and stay on top of it. That's where the lack of sleep comes in. Is all those late nights thinking of all those ideas and then getting up and executing them in the morning. We had a great team on that level. Constant input from Kickstarter, David Nin doing PR. Pieter Dam was just always there. He's in New York, we're in Los Angeles. That time difference made a difference, but we stayed on top of it. Yeah. And I think because, to a large extent, Pieter's sensitivity to the fans, I was able to translate some credibility I have with the fans based on my previous work. I was able to translate that through of how people wanted and needed.
Yeah. Hey Sal, totally. if I may add something, like one of the things we did to keep the project interesting was we had a couple of mystery rewards. And these mystery rewards were already part of existing reward levels from the get-go, but they were only revealed as soon as we hit certain funding milestones, like 50K or 100K. And that caused people to really track the campaign closely to see what they'd get extra, because they had already pledged, but there was this mystery reward as part of the package. And so they helped spread the word so they could find out. I mean, if we hit a certain milestone, we would tell them. And for instance, the first mystery reward we unlocked was for everyone who backed us at the $35 level and up. They get the opportunity to have their Log Lady cosplay photo included in the actual film. Yeah, the character has always been a favorite among Twin Peaks fans for Halloween parties. There's always a Log Lady at Twin Peaks viewing parties. So we knew a lot of people already had photos of themselves as the Log Lady or the Log Gentleman. And they could share it right away. So what we did on the Welcome to Twin Peaks Facebook page was we launched a challenge to create the longest possible comment thread with nothing but Log Lady cosplay photos. And people were also invited to tag friends of theirs who had dressed up as a character in the past. And we collected close to 200 photos on that thread, and we got tons of engagement on that Facebook post, which gave us an increased exposure for at least a couple of days.
Jeez, that's a lot.
And on top, and on top of that, I reached out personally to every single person who shared a photo to make sure they knew about the opportunity that if they backed the film, that photo could end up in the film if we were successful. So that's one of the things that we're actually hoping to hit the 50K milestone sooner than we did. But as soon as we did, that was a huge extra boost. And we doubled the number of backers those days. So
congratulations. That's awesome.
Yeah, thanks.
So it's kind of like almost like a stretch goal, but it's secret. So you're sort of creating that curiosity, and you're also getting people to participate in the project, not being like, hey guys, we really need your money or we need your funding. You're almost like building this community and this fun environment within the entire project. That's really neat.
And this works because it's David Lynch, it's David Lynch fans, and he's all about mystery. So and people like the fans always want to discover the mystery and reveal the mystery. So that's sort of what we built into this campaign to keep them excited and curious.
I had to interrupt this podcast episode because I want to introduce you to my friends at the Gadget Flow. Their product discovery platform reaches 22 million people per month. They've helped more than 5,000 crowdfunding campaigns thus far, and they have a social media following of more than 700,000 followers. If you want to gain access to their marketplace and list your own product, you can go to thegadgetflow.com/submit and list your project today. Now, let me ask you here. So one of the things you mentioned earlier was the actual campaign video. What do you think that you did right with that project? Because I know that a lot of people really struggle with putting together an effective campaign video. Do you have any tips or any advice for that?
I could answer that. I'd never cut a campaign video quite like it before in any way. Actually, a campaign video for something like this, and where I might make a trailer to approach it in a different way to keep the mystery. We were encouraged. We have a consultant that we hired by the name of Justin Giddings, who's the Kickstarter. And one of the things that he was pretty strong about in his training that we were able to look at video-wise was how to structure out that campaign video. And we went from something which was my natural inclination, which was highly dramatic, with really strong, powerful imagery, asking a lot of questions that made you want to see the film. We restructured it to something that had that element in it, but then let you know who was involved and how.
Yeah, exactly.
I think one of the things about Kickstarter more than anything else, Kickstarter, Indiegogo, any of these crowdfunding campaigns, is people want the personal engagement with the filmmakers, if it's a film. Mm-hmm. And by letting them see who was in the office, what the office looked like, how we were approaching this, letting them see us half asleep or half awake, just that the intimate portrait of who was going to make this and why it was important to us seemed to make a big difference and make that campaign video all the more.
Yeah, I think a big difference here too is that people need to see you. They really need to see the people, the creative minds behind the project, in order to really want to back it, in order to have any kind of interest whatsoever. Because we're all bombarded with so many commercial messages that we almost tune out when someone's trying to pitch something else. But when you have a bit of interesting backstory to it, and you get to a sense of the characters and even the personalities, the people involved, it can really pique that curiosity and that interest with the project, I think.
And I'd say it was the care, the personalities, but also the importance. There's an element of, I think people like to smell that desperation. You know, it's not a great race if the winner is so far away from the guy who's second that there's no competition. It's watching everybody sweat at those last minutes that makes a difference. It's watching the one-on-one, the tightness, and it's us against the time clock. We've got to make this. We also added. We had some anonymous donors and some non-anonymous donors put up matching funds. And it seemed that our matching fund campaigns really, really worked because we got out there and we said, hey, come on, let's go. Let's do this now. So there was a sense of urgency, which is really, really important in these kind of campaigns. And it's hard to do with a documentary that's about someone who's already passed. It's not like we've got to get this interview before she dies. She was gone. Yeah. So creating that urgency and getting people motivated immediately was something that I think was hard to do, but was effective for us eventually.
Totally. So, Pieter, let me ask you a question here. When it comes to the actual PR aspect of the project, you mentioned getting press. That's something that's really important. That's a way you can tap into an entirely new audience. You can also drive some traffic. Did you have any thoughts about that for those listeners in the community who are trying to raise money on Kickstarter? They're looking to maybe launch a project in a month or 2 months down the road. What advice do you have for them on the press outreach side?
Right. So we spend most of our day zero and day one reaching out to press. This is an interesting topic. The press loves to write about David Lynch and Twin Peaks related work. So we were spoiled with coverage. This gives you a huge boost in morale. Your team, if you see there are 20 articles on day one. But what we did find out was that it doesn't really generate any traffic to your Kickstarter page. There's engagement on social media, but people click through to the article, and that's where it stops. I mean, usually, articles aren't laid out like a sales page or a sales pitch. It's just the link is buried down somewhere in the copy. So even though we got massive coverage, it didn't really help us in terms of generating a backer. So in hindsight, I would have focused on securing 1 or 2 outlets in our niche, so people have something to share from a respectable site other than your source. But it is really about direct targeting and reaching out to the fans in a very direct way instead of going through press. I think we focused a little bit too much on getting press, whereas it's if you get 2 or 3 articles, that should be good. Yeah, that should be good.
You guys went overboard. You had a lot of different media mentions I saw there on your page. So
right, and what's important is actually getting that coverage towards the end of your campaign, and that's the tricky part because most of the press has already written about you, so they're not going to repeat, even though we tried. There's just one thing that we were able to pitch in our last 48 hours, and that was Johnny Jewel, who's the band leader of Chromatics. It's a very popular indie group. He contributed a 5-track EP with unreleased music, and he's big in the Twin Peaks world because he composed music for the latest season. So it was wonderful to have him donate music to the campaign, but what we pitched out to music sites in those final hours, and that was like, if this campaign doesn't get funded, this EP will never be released. It's like
that's a good tease. That's a good tease.
Yeah, so that really worked because we got 6 or 7 more articles written about us in a totally different niche. It was Brooklyn Vegan and music sites, Tiny Mixtapes. They covered the fact that it was an expiring music release, and that they really mentioned the urgency of this campaign, like get it funded or you will never hear this music. So that was a fun way to get coverage in the final hours. And I think that reminded many people about this campaign, because in the beginning, people check it out and they think, oh, they got a month left. This will get funded easily. But it's not as easy as everybody thinks. And getting that little breath at the end. Yeah, that was fun.
I'm speaking to the crowdfunders in the audience who have already launched a Kickstarter campaign, or have actually even successfully run a campaign. And the reason is, I think you will understand this pain point most. And that is, when you finally do raise money on Kickstarter or Indiegogo, the hardest part is not collecting the cash. The hardest part is shipping out all of those perks and rewards to your backers. It is a nightmare, my friends. It's a lot of spreadsheets, it's a lot of headache, and it's a lot of stress. That's why I recommend BackerKit. If you have not heard of BackerKit, they help you collect surveys, they help you collect data, and the entire fulfillment process is just so much easier and so many less spreadsheets when you use their software. You can check them out at backerkit.com and use CrowdCrux for a special discount. I do think you guys are you're definitely leading the charge here. Like, just looking at this project, particularly film-related projects, I think you're leading the charge in terms of raising money under a genre that's more difficult. Also raising money with all of these obstacles, having to get into something completely new, getting into social media, marketing, etc. So I think you're really leading the charge here. So I had one question. Would you have done anything differently? Would you have focused more then on your email list maybe, or on Facebook ads? Richard, would you have done anything differently with the project rather than, you mentioned doing a bit too much PR?
Well, let me just again address your other question real quickly, and then segue into that. I disagree with Pieter a little bit. Not that we've ever disagreed about anything before in a month long. There's an old saying that 50% of all the money you spend on advertising is wasted. You just never know which 50%. It's hard to know how much that press drove people if they didn't get driven immediately from that piece of press. So somebody might have seen an article and may not have clicked through to our site, but they may come back the next day, or they've seen a second piece of press which said, finally, let's do this. So I've also heard that it takes 7 impressions for someone to have of your product before they'll actually move and buy it. So I'm not sure I agree with Pieter that the press was not as directly effective, or at least stepwise indirectly effective. The other thing that I would have done for myself is I would have organized my own emails better. I don't think that enough of my personal group of friends and family were except through Facebook, which was highly effective, through my own email campaigns. I don't think they were as effective as they could have been. And I think that one of the things I think we did smart, but maybe didn't pull the trigger on as well as we could have, is we had 4 or 5 different subsequent targets beyond Twin Peaks fans. Catherine Coulson was also in the Cinematography Guild, and I think we left on the table from the Star Trek movies and stuff that didn't really even understand that we're doing a movie about someone who was the first AC on Star Trek Wrath of Khan. I think there are women's organizations that would have supported this project.
Mm-hmm. Totally. So there's a lot, I guess, in the way of other ways that you could have reached out to more demographics and more people. Yes.
Right. I compare crowdfunding like juggling 30 balls, and it's unavoidable to drop a few because there's so much going on when you're live. And, there's always something you can do. Like at one point I had my phone in my left hand and I was growing the Instagram audience. I was using my desktop computer to grow the Facebook audience simultaneously, just like a click farm. So, and meanwhile, you realize I could be doing this, I could be doing that. So yeah, there's so much going on. If you can plan things in advance, do it. Our campaign was a little different in the fact that we wanted to have a surprise element when we launched. So we didn't really grow our audience beforehand, but although we had a teaser email list a couple of months ago, and we did some teasing here and there, but it's not like we were telling people before launch that we were going to do this. But for other projects, that's a big deal. You should create and grow your audience before you launch.
Yeah. Cool. Well, so what is next for you guys? I mean, you have this massive project. You now have a bit of this crowd that you were trying to initially build up. You have people listening to you. You're now on podcasts. You know, you have people wanting your attention. What is next for you? What are you focused on after this campaign is wrapped up?
Let me answer the first part of that, and Pieter take the second half. For us, the primary thing here right now is making a great movie. It's one thing to have everybody glad that you're making this movie, and it's one thing to have the resources. Carl Gottlieb, who wrote the screenplay for Jaws, just a really funny and interesting man, is a friend of my brother's, and he sent a message along to me yesterday that said, "The hard part is over. Now comes the hard part." And making the movie is preeminent. Also, making sure that our audience stays with us during that time, and including one of the things we've done in our rewards that I don't think has ever been done before is we offered people editorial consultants, which meant that when we get our first cut of the movie, we're going to make watermarked versions of it and send it to each of the people who bought in and backed that particular pledge level. They'll be able to look at early cuts of the movie, make their comments, sit in on a Skype session with us as we talk about those ideas and editing them, and then do the same thing again as we get close to a final cut. Engaging the audience and keeping them with us, I think, is going to be essential, both for satisfying our goals on this project and hopefully taking some of that audience that wants to join us to build a basis for crowdfunding project that we do as well, which is yet to be announced.
What would you say, Pieter?
Well, yeah, I agree with Richard here. And just one thing I would like to add is that we have 1,751 backers, and among those are so many creative people, and we will definitely tap into their abilities, and because many of them have already offered us to help. Technically, graphically, visually, all those sort of things. So we will definitely, it's going to be an incredible journey to make this movie together with these 1,751 backers. And looking forward to it.
Awesome.
You're here.
Well, yeah, I'm looking at your Kicktrack stats, your project. It looks like the entire trajectory. You guys were hustling. You were getting more and more backers. You were working to get press. So I think you deserve every single penny of this. And it's pretty clear that the community is really happy with the work you've done thus far. So I'm excited to also see this come out when it's live and when you make the movie. So I'm looking forward to that. But thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing some of these great tips, because I don't think a lot of people actually are willing to be as transparent as you were and talk about filming their documentary work or their film or their indie project. So thank you for coming on and sharing that with some of the listeners here today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sal, and keep on doing the great work with your podcast.
Thanks a lot,
really
man.
Informative.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. I'm sorry that this interview, there's a little bit of issues with the audio surrounding this one. I did my best to sort of make the audio good for you guys, but unfortunately, sometimes just the realities of doing a virtual interview, there's sometimes just, the audio is not always that great. So I apologize for that. I hope that the good tips and advice made up for it. But if you look into some of the other episodes on my show, they almost always have great audio, very good, good reception, good quality. So I rarely get complaints on audio, but I apologize if it was for this episode not so great. It's really all in the spirit of trying to bring good information to you guys. Sometimes a project that's raised a lot of money doesn't necessarily, they're not familiar with doing podcast episodes. They're not familiar with doing media appearances. So a lot of what I do is sort of coaching people and getting them ready and warmed up to share these tips, to share these advices with you. So that way you can use that information going forward. It's kind of like, it's almost like uncovering the story and really getting to the root of those levers that they pulled in order to drive funding to their project. And that's I think my job here in the process. So I hope you liked today's interview. If you are interested in working one-on-one with me, working one-on-one with Sal, we'll get all of your questions answered. We'll make sure that you're doing everything correctly. We'll make sure that there aren't any red flags with your project. We'll set your strategy together, the things you need to do going forward, some of the action items, really all of that, and sort of drawing on that experience which I've accumulated, having helped many different projects, having seen many different types of fundraisers for various amounts, whether that's $50,000, 6 figures, $1 million. There are a lot of different things that go into these different financial raises, and also the type of project that you have. Like my advice for a film campaign or someone who's trying to raise money for an indie publishing project is going to be really different when I'm giving advice to an entrepreneur who has a team around them and trying to launch more of a physical product into the world. So I really do tailor my advice there, and that's the best way to tap into my stored knowledge since the last 6 years, having helped many different project creators. So if that sounds good to you, you want to sign up for that, you can go to crowdcrux.com/coaching. That is crowdcrux.com/coaching. Just go through the questionnaire there. Let me know a little bit about you. Let me know a bit about the project. Let me know about your funding goal. All of those different types of questions are just designed to give me more context before our call. But literally, I have never had anyone who has said like, wow, that call really sucked. Almost 100% everyone has said, wow, that was a lot of information. That was a lot of value. Like, so thank you so much. I did not expect that. I always try to exceed expectations. You know, with the content that I bring on the podcast, with my passion, with my energy, with my articles, all the content I provide for you, usually people are very blown away. They're like, that's really good content. And I try to do the same, stay with that same philosophy when it comes to also dealing one-on-one with people and my coaching students. That's really what I try to bring. So if you're interested, would love to work with you. But if not, go and check out some of the other episodes that I got out there on this show. Lots of them. We have a really big archive, more than 200 episodes, tons of great information. So I really invite you to sort of sink your teeth in and to dive deep with some of these amazing entrepreneurs that have been on the show. Again, my name is Sal, and I'll see you next time.